Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, and I'm the mayor of Freetown, the capital city of Sierra Leone, a small country in West Africa. I'm really honored to be here today, and I'd like to thank Burkhard Kosminski for inviting me to add my voice to the message that you will be receiving this evening. So let me take you back in time. Back to 2017. It's the middle of August, and we're into the rainy season in Freetown. It's been raining continuously for 3 days. And at 6:30 in the morning, I get a call from one of my former mayors, one of my former neighbors, not mayors. I had moved house just 2 weeks before, and 2 houses from where I used to live was now the site of a devastating mudslide. I was shaking as I showered, as I drove up to the scene. What I saw are images that I'll never forget. Literally a hole in the mountain, over 1,000 people dead, and 3,000 more homeless. The devastation was unimaginable. There were bodies washing downstream, limbs being uncovered. The rescue operation started immediately, and perhaps one of the most indelible memories for me was the scramble as we tried to reach a family that was trapped under the mud and who had phone signal for a little while. Unfortunately, no one came out alive. But the real tragedy is that this disaster that I witnessed in my city is becoming increasingly commonplace all over the world, but particularly in countries in the global south. Recent data shows that floods have increased 4-fold since the 2000s in the tropics. And recent headlines, you don't see them all in Germany, but I think you would have seen these ones. July, devastating floods in Uganda, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless. August, again, devastating floods in Bangladesh, the same story. And Sudan, just this September. So for us, climate change isn't something that we're anticipating. Sadly, climate change is real, and climate change is here. And it's destroying the lives of millions of people, depriving generations from the prospect of growth, from the ability for them to have their own better life. Over 60% of the population of Africa are small-scale farmers susceptible to climate change. So it's not just the floods, it's also the droughts. It's the rain coming when it shouldn't, not coming when it should, and the havoc that that plays to the agricultural sector. And a consequence is migration. The World Bank says that by 2050, over 216 million people will be displaced and on the move because of climate. And that move has started. A move from urban to rural, a move from rural to urban, internal moves, and ultimately international moves. I've seen an explosion of the population of my city. And the impact on the natural landscape and on the limited infrastructure that we have is really, really significant and severe. I come from a beautiful city. Freetown is nestled between mountains and the Atlantic Ocean. The mountains used to be green. They are now largely denuded. Brown slopes as people who are moving from the rural areas look for places to live. and make up their own solutions in the absence of development control. And then there are those who live along the coastline, destroying mangroves, destroying biodiversity. So the vulnerable moving for a better life, but actually finding themselves even more vulnerable. Because when the landslides happen, when the floodwaters come, they're the ones who are first hit. The internal migration that I've just described, from the rural to the urban, spills out, spills over, and it goes from internal to international. And that comes with it and is caused by, because it's a vicious cycle, the loss of livelihoods, the loss of childhoods, the loss of opportunities for people to actually have a better future. The embodiment of what people refer to as climate injustice. My continent accounts, depending on what data you look at, it accounts for between 0.55% to 2% of global emissions responsible for climate change. Over 70% of the world's emitters come from 9 countries plus the EU bloc, with the EU bloc being the 3rd largest emitter. And the crisis that I've described in my earlier words, I've mentioned countries that might seem far away. It's come closer home, because I know that this summer, Germany also experienced devastating floods with the loss of 165 people. And my heart goes out to all of those who lost their lives here in your country. What this does, though, it confirms to us that the recent IPCC report, which says that we are now in a code red situation globally, is true. I had lunch this afternoon with Burkhard and his team. A beautiful setting, across the green, in the open air. The sun was shining, the ducks were playing, and there was a band that we could hear. It was Fridays for Future, but we can pretend it wasn't. There was a band we could hear in the distance. And I can see how easy it is in those circumstances, in these circumstances, for climate change to feel like something distant, something removed, something that really isn't happening, or at least isn't touching your life. In contrast, in Freetown, we're still in the rainy season. I arrived this morning and I'll be going back tomorrow morning. And when it rains, I find it really difficult to sleep because I sit up worrying that there's going to be another landslide. And I'm checking the tides because I'm concerned that the sea level rises could impact coastal communities. The countries responsible for the greater percentage of emissions need to act now. Need to act not just for the sake of those of us who aren't major emitters, but are the most vulnerable and are experiencing devastating consequences today, but they need to act for everybody in this room. This disaster is going to affect all of us. The thing about climate change is that there's no way to spin it out, spin it away. Government rhetoric, playing on the margins, giving lip service, it won't cut it. It won't stop the impact that we will experience as temperatures rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius. So as we watch the play tonight, set in 2034, I urge us all to raise our voices today in 2021. To not only raise our voices, but for those in government, for the multinational corporations, those working in the fossil fuel industry, I urge us all to act. 2034 is only 12 years away. This might feel like fiction, but I want to assure you that it's not. What you're going to see and hear is a reflection of what is happening every day to millions of people. Children who can't get to school because their schools have been washed away, because their family's livelihood has been lost because of a flood or a drought. Simple things like bridges washed away and you become cut off from one community to another. This is now an everyday reality, and it doesn't need to be that way. So tonight, thank you for listening, and I ask that as you leave here, you leave remembering that there's a role that we all can play, a role we all must play to ensure that we do not have a continuation of this ecocide. Thank you.